Welcome to the Purpose Driven Mom Show, episode 384. I'm so excited for today's guest. We have my friend CJ Buys, who is an accessibility designer who turns their experience as a neurodiverse, chronically ill, and disabled person into a passion for helping small business owners create sustainable, the keyword here, non-overwhelming accessibility solutions for their spaces and products. CJ is a friend of mine, has been a member of the Purpose Driven Mom Club for a few years. I actually got to meet CJ and their wife in Disney last year when I went. And I only met a handful, I was saying on the episode, of our guests in real life. So it's such a fun experience. And I've gotten to watch CJ's journey over the past few years of taking this passion and turning it into a business. CJ is so knowledgeable on how we can take small tweaks, make these tiny, tiny changes in our business to really allow our content to be seen and heard and impact people no matter what. I think as business owners, we already have this massive to-do list, right? There's so many things running through our brains. There's a lot of things on our plate, but here's the thing. You can make small tweaks towards accessibility in your products, your websites, your services, your business, so that you can impact the people that need you, okay? You're going to want to grab CJ's freebie. Everything is going to be over at purposedrivenmom.com. So podcast 384, show notes down there. Please listen, take notes. And if you are a new business owner, I want you to just take a deep breath. You don't have to be overwhelmed about everything we talk about today, but just start to think, right? Start to think, how can I start to change things inside my business to help just be more accessible for other people? Enjoy this conversation I had with CJ, all about just how you can have better accessibility and start to make some changes in your business. All right, welcome to the Purpose Driven Mom Show, episode 384. I'm really excited. Today, I have one of my friends, CJ Buys, here, and they are an expert in accessibility and website design and going to help us figure out ways that we can set up our websites and our businesses in a way to be accessible to all people. And I've been picking CJ's brain, and I was like, come on the show, please. Come on the show, because there are so many things that I know I need to update, fix, and also things I wish I knew in the beginning. And so I know that we have so many people who listen who are in those starting phases. So before we jump in, CJ, tell us a little bit about you and your family.
So I grew up in Maine, big love of Maine, and then ran away because the snow is awful and I hate the cold. And so I now live in Florida, just outside of Orlando with my wife and our three cats.
Yeah.
And I am just, starting off with my accessibility business and trying to help small business owners feel like they have control over the process of doing accessibility, because like everything in the small business world, it feels like a huge thing and it can feel super overwhelming. And it both is and isn't as overwhelming as it feels, like everything.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to ask, I have a lot of questions I think are for me, but I know that other people have, but I wanted to share a fun fact, because this actually, I don't know if has ever happened with a guest on my show, but CJ and I have actually met in real life. And so I love this. And actually, I was thinking it's been a year now, because it was last Thanksgiving. Yes. So CJ is a member of the Purpose Driven Mom Club. And when I went to Florida last year, I went to Disney with my family. CJ's wife, Meg, works in Disney. And I was like, hey, like maybe we can make this happen. And it was wonderful because I kind of drove my kids back home and got to go out as a grown up. And we had just such an amazing time and such a great night getting to hang out and connect. And I honestly think, besides like maybe one other guest out of 384 episodes, you might have been the only one I've really actually met in real life.
Wow,
Right?
that's crazy. And my mind is still blown that it's been a year, but I think that's just been how this year has been, that it's just felt like it's taken so long. And at the same time, it's gone by so fast.
100%. I know. Well, I was looking too at my memories coming up when I was planning my Disney trip, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that was a year ago already. My kids are like, can we get to go back? And I'm like, I wish we could have gone back this year. So maybe next year, we'll see. So let's jump into some of this accessibility tasks, and kind of, I would love to dispel some myths for people too, because you are 100% right when you said it. It feels so overwhelming for us. We already are getting started in our business. We've got all these things we need to do. And now there's this other component we want. I hope a lot of us like want to add in, right? Like it's important,
Yeah.
right? But it just goes to the list and we don't know where to start. So can we just briefly talk about, like, in your terms and your eyes and what you teach, like what accessibility, like like means for our online business owners?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to understand is that, like so many things in life, there's this sort of assumption by the people who are creating the internet that everybody is going to approach what's like the process of being on the internet in the same way. And that's just not true. And that's never been true. And that's not true in any part of our lives. And so accessibility is really this process of looking at how we interact with the internet and saying, how do we make it so that everybody can access this? Everybody has this space. What are sort of the barriers? And it very much centers the experience of disabled people in many different ways. But at the same time, the core value of it is that it makes it accessible for everybody, regardless of whether you're disabled or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is, yeah, it's a big mission. And it can be very complicated. And I feel like I'm rambling a little bit right now.
No, it's
Because
fine. But here's the
so
thing,
big.
because it feels big. And I think one of the things that I think is important, when you're looking at your business stuff too, is, we look at things through our lens, and we always talk about like the curse of knowledge, right? You teach something because you understand it. And when I teach things, sometimes I think, oh, this is simple, or like, obviously they get it. And I think that we can look at this curse of knowledge in parallel a little bit with some of the accessibility stuff, because as a person who doesn't struggle with maybe a visual impairment or hearing impairment or executive functioning issues, like, because I don't think about it. And I think that one of the things that we as online business owners need to recognize is that not everyone thinks, learns, and acts like us. And so if we want our things to be available and accessible for other people that aren't just like, us, fit into our box, it's important to look outside a little bit and ask ourselves, are they able to do this? Or what can I do to make it easier? I think that is the big question I'd love to pose today and help kind of demystify for people who are feeling like it's so overwhelming, because there are small tweaks that you can probably make that would make a world of difference to learners, and I know we've done a couple things. We don't do it perfectly, but over the years, it started with the most simple thing of like, we didn't have captions on anything. And it started with that. And then it added into, we put transcripts into the summit and people liked that. And one of the reasons we actually started to put the podcast on YouTube, and this is why we wanted to do it, was because I was like thinking about it one day years ago. And again, I own this. We didn't put the podcast on YouTube till months ago. It just took us, because it was like another thing and it kept getting pushed and pushed down the line. But my thought was like, wait, if I only have a podcast, how is someone who struggles with hearing or has a hearing impairment going to hear my content, right? If it's like it really bothered me, and I was like, what are we going to do? But honestly, it became, we kept pushing it back because we had nothing. And finally I said to my podcast, and I was like, let's get this going. Like, let's just get it up there so at least they can have a visual and there's captions and there's something. So I just also, before we really jump into some nitty gritty details, also want to say, doing something, even though it feels like this overwhelming task, is so much better than saying, well, I can't do everything and make it accessible to everyone, so I'm not going to do anything. So just know that you don't have to do all the bells and whistles, but something could help make your content consumed by someone else easier, which again, like, that's the point.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I want to sort of give permission to people to do, because I am perfectionistic. I fall into that pattern a lot. I'm like, if I can't do this quote right, then I mentally am like, well, I shouldn't do it at all. And accessibility feels like this giant mountain, and there's so much. But the thing is it's a giant mountain made out of little tiny pebbles. And you can do a few little things right now and add more and add more. And that is making a difference, and that is helping. So you really please don't fall into that mindset that you have to do it all, or that you have to do it all right in the moment. Because here's the other thing, technology is constantly updating. And as we understand like as technology changes and as we understand more about people's needs and how people interact with the internet, accessibility and what is considered best practices is also already changing, just like it is in every other area of small business and the internet and the world. So if you spend so much time focusing on getting everything perfect, by the time you're 2 steps in, you're going to need to be updating things. So, that's my biggest thing that I hope people take away is that pick a few small things when you're getting started. Implement those. Create a practice that you're just going to be doing those. Add more as time goes on, the same way that you're going to be adding more things to your business in every other area. It doesn't have to be an all at once perfectionistic thing.
Yes. So permission granted. You hear it from the experts, right?
Yes.
Like permission granted, right? Like we don't have to do it all. So, okay, CJ, here's how I think I want to do this. I want to talk about those pebbles, right? I love that. Little pebbles. Loved it. I want to pull out a couple specific things I know that my audience is like working on. And I'd love to get kind of your thoughts on like what they can do. Okay. So we know that we have a lot of people who are thinking about starting a business or like in their beginning stages. So one of the first couple things we're doing, right, is maybe you're making like an online course. Let's start there. And then I think I'll pull out a couple other things I know they're working on so we can get specifics. When I'm going in and making my course, what are some things I could keep in mind accessibility wise while I'm building it?
So I feel like we talk a lot about alt text, image descriptions, and like how to make images accessible, which is a big thing because images are sort of like this black hole to a lot of the accessibility tools that people use. There's not a lot that they can do with it. So you need to have this structural stuff that you do to help with that. And if you're using videos, which I think that a lot of us do when, a lot of people do when they're doing courses, having the captions, having transcripts is really important. I think that, as much as I have sometimes hesitancies around AI, I think this is one of the areas that AI is really great to use because captions can take a long time if you're going to be going in and typing them by hand. So like having auto-generated captions, but then going back in and double checking to make sure that they're actually saying the thing that you were saying is really, really important. Just to make sure that, your message is getting across to everybody. And then just sort of understanding how the structure of a website, like a web page, generally works. One of the biggest things that is a huge help anytime that you're using a website is the heading system, because you have this built-in feature in like I think every single web page system that you're ever going to use, where you can tag things as H1, H2, H3, and this is this built-in, here's a format. Like this is going to look like a nice big heading. This one's slightly smaller. This one's even smaller. And then it tells anything that's accessing your web page, this is the main point. H2, these are all the sub points. So you can structure anything that you're doing like an outline, like a bulleted list with things nested. And that will really, really help in terms of one, looking at it. It's going to make it so much easier to read, so much easier to like group content in your head. So anytime you're dealing with any sort of like executive function, or even just I'm super overwhelmed and my kid is screaming and I can't focus, that's going to really help with comprehension. And it's going to help any software that is analyzing this page to give it to a user, like a screen reader, to know this is what is going on and this is how I should approach this content.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the screen readers? Because I feel like we talked a couple weeks ago and you said something about the screen. Like I didn't know much about screen readers, about like the way that it reads text. So for anyone who isn't familiar with that also, could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that will also help people in building their content out.
Yeah. So screen readers are generally used by people who are blind or have any other reason that they don't want to or can't access content visually. And it's kind of a specialized software. If you're going to be using a lot of it, you're going to really want to have somebody who is a screen reader user actually digging into it. It's kind of like somebody who's not a mom giving mom's advice. You're going to kind of be like, well, that's great, but but there is a certain amount of stuff that I, as not a screen reader user, know and can help with. Basically, it's going to be going through the web page and reading out the content, but it needs help because there's all this metadata behind your web page that is telling it, like the heading system, this is important, this is a link, this is an image. And so you can actually read through the entire web page as it is, but you also, when you're using a screen reader, have the ability to skip through things, to move from heading to heading, which is why the heading system is so important, and it has to be like well structured, because you can jump through it, and if it isn't well structured, it's like trying to read a crappy outline. You're like, what is going on here?
Yep.
And you can also jump through links, which is why one of my other big pieces of advice is when you're naming your links, don't just name it click here. Because if somebody's jumping through, they're going to hear link, click here, link, click here. And they're going to be like, what is this?
Oh, okay.
So if you want to say, so if you want to say, like, click here to purchase my book, click here to view my book on Amazon, then that's going to tell somebody looking through, or even just my book on Amazon, link my book on Amazon. Like, that's going to be so much more comprehensive for the person who's listening to it. And it also just helps when you're reading through and you're like, what is this link going to do? Oh, it's going to take me to Amazon to view Cara's book.
Oh,
so that is
CJ. That was all. I'm already like, oh my God, that is not so. And I love this because it's like, this is such a tiny thing that is not, it's low lift for me as a business owner, right? Like I can easily do that, and it can make such a difference to somebody else while they're doing it. So I want everyone to hear that, like, low lift things really do make a difference on that. Just naming the link separately, and also just about like the heading system that CJ is talking about. Like if you use WordPress or Square, like all of those have them built in, right? So like just by using those, because I know the newer people are like, what are you talking about? When you get started, just use them, right? Like just start to use those because they're there for you. It's not an extra thing you might have to like add on. That's kind of how it's structured.
It's totally built in, and it is going to make everything so much easier just from the standpoint of if you were to go in and try to make a heading on your own, you're going to have to pick the font size and, if it's bold and what the spacing is. And the heading system does all of that for you. And so every time that you select something and say, this is a heading, it's going to have the exact same formatting. It's going to look exactly the same as every other heading of that type. And so it's just already built in, going to make everything look more consistent and more polished just by using this. And it has this huge bonus for accessibility. So it really is like, that is the sort of thing that, like, when you're going in and creating your webpage, you're gonna have to do a certain amount of this work anyways. And these sort of things that I'm focusing on are sort of you can do it accessibly or you can do it not accessibly. And it's, to a certain extent, kind of the same amount of work.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to know that this is something that you can do and that will help people. And then
and it's not huge. It's not a huge thing. Okay. My brain's already going because you said a couple things. All right. I want to talk fonts and colors in a second. I want to go back to alt text because I don't know much about this. And I think last time you had said this thing about using alt text on different places. So can you tell us a little bit about like best practices with I don't remember what it's not is it the alt text or there's something else that you can do with the images? Give us some best practice. I'm not even going to pretend like I know. Give us some best practices on image, because we're doing images. We're doing it on social media. It's on the website. We're all putting them everywhere. And this is one thing I was just thinking today. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never do this on my social media. Like, how is someone supposed to? And like, that's always the question. Like, because I live in it. Right. And like, for me, like, I was a special education teacher for almost 10 years. And I feel like I come from a little bit of a different perspective, because I used to be in the world where I was like always thinking about my kids and where they were struggling and like that. And I haven't taught in almost 9 years now. And so I feel like I start forgetting like to think about like how other people perceive things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how can someone see my image? And the answer is like, well, they can't. Like, right. Like, I'm putting this stuff out there and like, or they're really struggling, which then means that they can't get the impact from what I'm teaching, and they might need that. So, okay. Talk to us about images. Give us some best practices.
So I will say that my freebie on my website is actually a quick guide to walk you through creating alt text.
Beautiful.
So don't feel like you need to get out a pen and paper and like notes. It's going to be there. It's, because I know it's a big issue, and I know that it's something that I know I struggled with it. I sort of went into it with like, I must describe everything in this image and I must give you all of the context. And here's the secret. You don't have to, and you actually shouldn't. The most important thing is to understand what the point of the image is. You can have a picture of, you and your kids, and maybe it's introducing you, and maybe it's celebrating your kid's birthday. And those are two different purposes, and those should have different alt text, because at the end of the day, you want the person who is looking at the alt text or hearing the alt text to know what they would be getting out of the picture if they were seeing it. And that's not all of the information that's in the picture. That's, very targeted. So really the first thing is to know that if you have like a decorative squiggle or a line or something, that does not need alt text. If it's just there to be there, you don't need alt text. And you can just mark it as this is decorative, and you're all good. And the next thing is to really focus in on what you're hoping somebody is going to get out of this. And to target it towards that. And one of the things that I really appreciate and that I personally prefer is when we do alt text, it's in the background of an image. It's in like the code. And so it's going to be seen by a screen reader, but it's not necessarily going to be easily accessible to somebody who's just scrolling through Instagram. And so that can be a little hard because what if they don't know who your family is? And they're like, oh, this is a cute picture, but I don't know who any of these people are. It doesn't have the same emotional impact. Also, like if somebody is translating everything, they're not going to be able to translate text that's in an image. It's just going to be words in a foreign language. And so I actually like to put alt text in the description, like in the caption. So if you're making a post, you would have your caption, and then underneath it, just do description and put your alt text there.
Okay.
And that way, and then put your tags beneath it so that they're there. You're still getting the impact of your tags, but your description is really easy to find. And that would mean that anyone who's viewing your image can see what's in it, what the point is, and get that without having to go digging for something. So it just makes it more accessible, not just in terms of, people who are using a screen reader and who are accessing the alt text in that way, but in terms of anybody who is seeing your image, who might need that information or want that information and not feel comfortable asking.
Yeah, just right there in the caption. Okay, so could you give an example? Like if I had a picture of like me and my family, right? Like, and the goal of that was that I was, sharing, how we took some time off to do something together. Like that's what the caption was like about. And so it was like a picture of us playing a board game or something like that.
So as always, when you're talking about a family, talking about kids, talking about people who are not you, like you want to figure out how much information you want to be sharing, whether you want to be putting names in there. And then you could list out who's there, maybe give like from left to right, and then say playing a board game. If it really matters what the board game is, playing Monopoly together. So just giving sort of that context, but in that context, you can also say, are we talking in the caption about playing Monopoly? Then you don't really need to say we're playing Monopoly because you have that information right above. And so you can more sort of tailor it to what you actually need that isn't in the caption as a whole. But in this context, I feel this is one of the reasons why accessibility can be a little bit tricky, is because if you're going to be going and using like an accessibility checker on anything, one of the automated tools, there are some out there and they're really helpful. But it's going to see an image that doesn't have alt text and it's going to go, oh no, you don't have alt text. And that's really helpful. But if you have a description in the caption, don't put it in the alt text.
Yep. You don't need it because you got it there.
Yes. And because what would happen with a screen reader is that they're going to go read one and then they're going to read the other. And so you're going to get the same thing twice. And it's going to be just
even probably more confusing, honestly, because they're like, wait, why are we doing this twice? Oh, okay. Okay. So, and again, CJ just gave us, it was like a sentence, right? Like it doesn't have to be, oh, I just wrote out a whole caption and now you're asking me to write out a 12-point description of the colors of the shirt, right? Like, so again, thinking through, like, it's just one small tweak we can make. So can you tell us a little bit about any of these tools that are helpful? And also I want to say this, we're going to have at the show notes, thepurposedrivenmom.com/podcast 384. So if you want to get CJ's freebie, they have it over there. So you can do that alt text checker and look at all those things and the way to write them. So just swipe up on your podcast player or you can check those out. So I want to say that for everyone who's like, wait, I want to make sure I get all the steps. We have it for you. Just, swipe up and get it. But yeah, let's talk about some tools that you find helpful and then any caveats you want to toss in there.
Yeah. So I have a list of resources that I like on my website, which I gave you a link for the podcast notes. So people will have it. And those just have a couple of the things that I like to use. A lot of times when, depending on what you're using, there will be different checkers. So there's like checkers for PDFs that are like, if you're using PDF software, it's going to have its own checker. So I don't know that I have a checker on there yet, but I will add one. I will add a checker. But I also have some stuff on color contrast, different ones to help you pick colors that are going to have good contrast, and some really basic understandings of the accessibility guidelines.
Beautiful.
Because there's this huge document out there that's called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. And I highly recommend that nobody ever look at it if they are a small business owner. Don't go digging into it because it's huge and it's very, very technical. And it's legalese and technical at the same time of like trying to really be specific. And so what I actually have included on my resource pages are a couple of resources to sort of give you a real understanding of what the guidelines mean and what they're asking for and the point that's actually geared towards people who are not on the back end actually writing the code. So
thank you for that. Thank you for that. And then, but this is why, like, when you start your business, right? And, I've known CJ for a few years now, and I've seen this iterations of getting, but this is why it's needed, right? because
Yeah.
that jargon is like over my head and it's not accessible to me. So I wouldn't be able to do it. So this is why everyone thinking out there, like, does anyone need what I want to offer as a business? The answer is yes, right? Because you are needed in all these places. Like the world needs someone like CJ out there who's going through and making it easy to understand and simplifying it for us small business owners so that we don't do the thing that we talked about in the beginning, which is it's too big, can't handle it, not going to worry about it. I'm just not going to do it at all. Right. So I appreciate that. And like, yeah, we'll have all those resources over there. Okay. I have a couple more questions before we kind of close out. Well, I have a lot of questions, but I wanted to go back to this one because this was on my mind when we were talking about website stuff. I want to talk about fonts and colors really quickly because I feel like these are like some quick tweaks, simple things. Like I know there's a lot behind it, right? But thinking about font size and colors, what recommendations, like, are there specific colors that, you know, are better, are worse, stand out to be just easier? I'd love your thoughts on this.
To be honest, most colors can be either good or bad.
Okay.
It depends on how you're using them,
Mm.
which is very unhelpful. But that is why I included my 3 favorite accessibility checkers for color on my resource list because those are the ones that I personally go to every time I'm picking colors and use them in different combinations to help find something that looks good and also is going to be accessible because it's hard. And I put this out there knowing that this is a little bit beyond what we're talking about. But when you use checkers like this, they're going to give you the guideline sort of standards. There's A, double A, and triple A standards on all of the accessibility guidelines. And A is sort of this is what's necessary in order to work with the different kinds of accessibility software. This is sort of your basic level. And double A is this is really nice. And this makes the experience really nice for people. And triple A is this is for really specialized websites. So it's really great if you can hit triple A. But especially when you're talking about colors, you probably shouldn't bother. It is very hard. Outside of like black and white or colors that are very hard to distinguish from black and white to hit a triple A level of accessibility. So if you try to do that, which I have done, you will be very, very sad at the color palette that you generate. And I am somebody who looked at that and was like, AAA, that's the best. I should do that. And then cried inside. So understand that you definitely look to hit A, like you have to. That is sort of, that's the bar. And if you can hit double A whenever you can, that's great. Like you are doing really well if you are hitting double A. And if you're able to hit triple A, that's really awesome. But it's sort of like a know your audience thing. If you are working with people who have, like you're working with a large percentage of, or there are really important people that you're working with who are using, who really need you to hit those standards, then you should definitely be hitting those standards. And if you can hit those standards, then you should. But I don't know that I want to say that actually. We should cut that.
Yep. Go ahead, Sharon. We can go back on that a little bit. Where do you want to restart?
Just on like not hitting AAA and if you the whole thing about if people don't need it.
Okay, go ahead. Sharon will cut it.
Yeah. I don't remember what I was saying before that.
Okay, wait. So, well, I'm gonna read it back in. So, what would be just like hitting an A then?
So I haven't looked at it's when you're looking at the checker, they're doing an analysis of like ratios of color. This is not something that you really want to be digging into the science behind. You pretty much when you're doing this, you are going to be entering one color, another color, and it's going to be doing all of the work for you. And it's going to tell you this hits this level of compliance or it doesn't.
Okay.
And then these tools also will help you to adjust the color to see, oh, this is a similar shade that will actually be compliant.
Oh, interesting.
Versus, so you're always comparing it to another color. Like if you're doing blue text on white, you're comparing
like
the
background
letter
to the
like
font. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you also really don't have to be comparing every single color in a thing. What you want to be understanding is like, if you're looking at this image as a whole, are you able to get the point of the image?
Mm.
So text on a background, yes, you definitely have to be making sure that those have enough color contrast. But if you're looking at, say, 2 or 3 different colors on a background, and all of them have enough contrast against the background, but you may not necessarily be able to tell the difference between the 3 at, with a color checker. If you don't need somebody to be able to tell the difference between the 3, if it's not actually adding something major, then that's okay.
Yeah.
If you're looking at like a bar graph and you're saying this bar is different from this bar, is different from this bar, then that's one thing. But if it's 3 different colors of font and it's just being pretty, that's different.
Yeah. Yeah. So thinking of like the function of what you want them to be able to do and distinguish. And then
Definitely.
before we close, I just want to say this other thing of mobile versus website. So just one thing to always do when you make a page, just check the mobile. Because I get a lot of feedback for business owners that like submit free offers for websites. They want me to like just give them my like eyes on it. We did this yesterday actually at the Business Roundtable. And I did this yesterday. And the one thing I always say is like, look at what it looks like on mobile, because like people will send me their freebies and I'm like, this is too small. Like, I don't know what this says. Right. And so I give a lot of feedback of like, chunk your text out a little bit more because it's smooshed together. And like, that's really hard to read. And I'm like, my brain looks at it and is like, nope, like, I don't want to read that. Right. Like, that's too hard to read.
Mine too.
So, yeah. So I like just chunk it out and just check what it looks like on mobile, because I think typically we build on desktop. So then when we look at it on mobile, it could like look a little bit different and you can start to notice some things that maybe aren't the easiest to look at or to comprehend or to understand, especially because on mobile fonts get smaller. They just look a little bit different. Images, if you don't have it formatted right, will look small. So just always checking on mobile, no matter what, best practice.
Definitely. And a lot of when you're going into a software to create a web page, a lot of them will have options for you to preview it as a desktop, a tablet, a phone. And so you don't need to be sending your draft website to your phone to look at it. You may have to do some Googling to figure out where they hid it. Sometimes it's a little hard to find, but it will be there. They will have that functionality. And worst case scenario, you can also just resize your window to be super narrow and you'll see how things change when you do that. It's not quite as good as viewing it as a preview of mobile, but it is a really quick check just to be like, did things shift in the right way? Are my paragraph, like, did the width of my paragraphs go from reasonable to, wow, there isn't a single word that isn't hyphenated?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, again, quick check, quick things to do. Okay, CJ, I feel like I have tons of questions, but we're gonna park for there. Because again, this is not a topic I know a ton of about. So when CJ and I talked originally, I was like, I would love to have you come on and share your expertise, because I think it's important as you're getting into your business to think about these things, right? And to think, I have this message, I have this thing that I want to impact people with, but if people cannot access it, they cannot be impacted, right? So it's like, what small tweaks can I do to make my user experience better? So we're going to put show notes over at a purposedrivenmom.com/podcast384. But CJ, you want to just tell us where we can find and connect more with you?
Yeah. So my website is cjbuysdesign.com. And I'm assuming if you will probably be able to see in the show notes, my last name is spelled Buys, like buys a chocolate cake. And then I can also be found on social media as CJ Stratton Buys. And I am very happy to connect with everybody. I'm really passionate about this, and I love helping people to do this because it really is such it feels like such an overwhelming thing. And I say that as somebody who, had to learn it, had to, dig into it myself, and it can feel so big. And yeah,
Doesn't have to be.
we don't want it to be like
Yeah.
it just because it is in and of itself a big issue does not mean that it has to be
Mm.
a big issue
Yes,
for
for you.
to
Yes.
implement.
I love it. And it's been really fun watching your journey, CJ. I won't be too much, but you know how I get. Like I mentioned, I've known CJ for years, and watching you like decide what you're gonna do and create the like I feel like nope, there it goes. I feel like much now. But just watching, you know how I get. I feel like I've seen all the stages, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen all the stages of it. And it's just so cool. It's just so cool to get to see this and see the impact. And I'm so glad you kept with it because what you're doing makes a big impact and is needed. And anyway, I'm just happy. Make me all mush. I'm really proud of you. And just in case nobody tells you today, I just want to let you. I'm super proud of you. You've done an amazing job. Oh, thanks. All right, listen, show notes are over at apurposedrivenmom.com/podcast 384. You can watch this over on our YouTube channel as well. Go and check out CJ's freebie. They put it in the links for us. We've got everything. Go connect over there. Thank you again, CJ.
My pleasure.